Let's pick it up where we left off in terms of attribution. I was saying we need a consistent long time series of data for facilitating detection itself, and then attribution is not always possible with just data, so we often rely on models for that. This is an example of a reconstructed time series of stream flow, annual mean stream flow reconstructed for the Boulder Creek, and we are looking at a 100-year drought, which in this case is defined as flows dropping below 30,000 acre feet. You always need a definition for extreme event. Here you look typically for return periods, and the return period here is that there are 5 events in the 437-year record, so that's a frequency of 0.01 or 1% of all years are these extreme droughts. So average annual risk is 1% chance, and the 100-year drought, the average return period is 1 in 100 years. So you found some in the 1600s, 1800s, and then the 20th century. This gives you a sense that even though there is a difference in the return periods, the average return period remains 1 in 100 years. So obviously you have to look for many such examples and then try to see if there is going to be changes in the future, or there are already changes happening that are detectable from data. So attribution science, then you look at the number of extreme weather events here in terms of heat waves, droughts, rain and flood, extreme rain and flooding, oceans, so it could be heat waves, sea level rise, etc., cold ice and snow storms. And the main point here is that this is a compilation of 170 studies examining the role of human-induced climate change in 190 extreme weather events, which covered these types of events. The red color here corresponds to more severe or more likely to occur. So either you are changing frequency or the amplitude with the same frequency of event. Less severe or less likely to occur, no discernible human influence, and when the data is insufficient, it's shown in this gray. Okay, so you can see that heat waves clearly have a detectable signal of becoming more severe or more frequent. Same for drought, even though the number of extreme events here is smaller. Rain and flooding, similar to drought. So you have events where it could be heavy rains in one area, like in India. At the same time, there are droughts in other parts of India. So it's as if the moisture is being taken from one place and dumped over another place, which actually does occur. It's called rich get richer and poor get poorer, where regions that are evaporating and supplying moisture to the rainy regions are getting drier, and rainy regions are getting heavier rain. So can make a big difference in runoff, groundwater recharge, crop damage, floods, etc., and so on. Okay, so oceans and storms, etc. That's kind of what gives you a sense of how to look for climate change at multiple levels. This is an example of climate change just with respect to health impacts. So we are looking at climate change having direct impacts, indirect impacts, and health impacts. So you have direct impacts through changes in magnitude, severity, or frequency of heat waves, storms, floods, and droughts, which affect indirectly air quality, water quality and quantity, food quality and quantity, and ecosystem changes. Then health impacts include cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, infectious food, water-borne diseases, and a number of, let's say, mosquitoes and vectors that carry diseases. Allergies, injuries, mental illness. In fact, these can also change habitats in such a way as to make human contacts more likely in some cases through other human activity as well as climate change, like COVID-19. potentially evolved out of human contact with wildlife, either bats or the other animals that were infected by the bats. So groups at risk include socioeconomically disadvantaged. So this is where the vulnerability concept becomes important again. Pregnant women and their unborn child. Rural communities, which are typically more vulnerable, people with disabilities, children, industries and their workers, remote aboriginal communities, older people, tourists when you go visit places that are infected with diseases, especially the global north touring the global south countries with higher infections through water, food and vectors. Okay, so the three main types of climate attribution studies, along with their respective subjects and emergence times, are shown in this period going from the 90s to the last decade. Obviously, it has come with greater computing power because you have to do multiple simulations by removing forcings one by one, like removing CO2 or methane or land use change or solar forcing and so on, to attribute the signal that you have detected to human causes, or whether there is a human contribution to the probability or the severity of the events that you are looking at. So attribution of long-term change was a big thing in the 90s with temperature, sea ice, circulation, precipitation, sea level, and extremes in temperature, precipitation, drought, and so on. In 2000, we moved to event attribution. So the heat wave of Europe in 2003, the floods of, I think, also 2003 in UK, heat wave in Siberia in 2010, and so on. So we looked for extreme temperatures, cyclones, wildfires, extreme precipitation, drought, hurricane, extreme snow events, etc. And now we are moving towards impact attribution. Okay, there is a slight difference in just looking at climate variables like temperature, rain, cyclones, wildfires, etc. But looking at impacts on human systems, physical systems, marine ecosystem, and terrestrial ecosystem. You remember that IPCC figure we saw before. We'll come back to that. So that's where the event attribution but also impact attribution become very important. So let's look a little bit more into droughts, since we already mentioned droughts in the Boulder Creek. Drought types depend on meteorological drought, where rainfall or snowfall have fallen below some sort of a long-term average or long-term climatology. Or hydrological drought, when lack of precipitation decreases the stream flow and lake and reservoirs or groundwater levels. Agricultural drought is when lack of soil moisture and groundwater begin to affect crops and livestock, part of the food production system. Or socioeconomic droughts, where food and water supply do not meet the demands because of the meteorological drought being severe enough or long lasting enough. And there are ecological droughts which depend on lack of precipitation, impacting native plants and animal species, that the natural ecosystem in the area. So obviously there is a human perception involved in these, because these are not strict definitions that are quantifiable. There is some perception involved, as we will see. So looking at how we understand the likely influence on event types in general, going from low to high, and on this axis you have ability to detect possible influence of global warming on specific events. So in the context of attribution, we can look at severe convective storms. We don't understand them so well. They are very high frequency, small scale events. We often don't have data either in situ or satellites, because satellites cannot sense that scale usually, unless they are specifically designed for that. So there are often campaigns done like the Dynamo campaign for MJO, the Year of the Maritime Continents, going back even further back, you have Toga Core and so on. Wildfires, extreme snow and ice. So you can see that the likely influence on event type goes up on this axis, and the ability to detect possible influence goes up as well, especially when you get into extreme heat and extreme cold. So this is kind of a qualitative graph, but still it represents the process understanding we have at this time, the ability to monitor these events at this time, and to translate those observations into detection and then attribution at this time. Okay, a good example of the cascading effects of climate change and climate impacts through, let's say, the ecological systems is given here as a schematic from this nice classroom website. It's talking about human impacts with abiotic factors and biotic factors. So it includes on the abiotic side climate change and modification of geochemical cycles and fire frequency that we talked about before, and biotic factors like habitat loss and fragmentation, hunting activities, and species invasion. Okay, so either it's intentionally introducing species, non-native species, or human impacts attracting non-native species. They result in recurrent plant phenological events like leafing, flowering, fruiting, seed germination, and seedling establishment. So there are implications for conservation, maintenance of biotic interactions and biological diversity. The mutualistic relations like pollinators and seed dispersers get affected during this flowering and fruiting. There are antagonistic relations between, like, let's say, herbivores and their competition. So the cascading effects can be very complicated, and we will see later on whether the Earth system models at this time are including these sorts of processes and how that would affect not only detection and attribution but also information for adaptation. Right? So looking at number of individuals as a percentage of a baseline, looking at leaf production and insect activity, you can see that this is showing schematically 3 years with interannual variability. And you can see that climatic change is introducing a shift in the leaf production from, let's say, September to November, because the dry season is getting longer, so leaf production is becoming later. Then there is a higher overlap between plant and insect activity. Okay, so the insect life cycle is being affected as well, but that is the combination is that leaf production and insect activity are going to coincide, so there is going to be higher herbivory damage. So there is a decrease in physiological efficiency, and that results in decrease in plant fitness. So you can see how change in physical or biophysical conditions cascaded into interactions between insects and plants. Okay, there is also changes in these seeding, seed germination and seeding establishment. So here is a dry season again getting longer. So the flowering and fruiting activities are shifted here from October and December to December and February respectively because of climate change. So that limits pollination. So lower fruit set going to lead to limited seed dispersal and lower seed germination and seedling establishment. Okay, so you can see the activity timings are getting shifted. Okay, so there are many recorded cases that indicate these things, from wild cherries in Michigan to some fruits in Himachal Pradesh, like apples and so on. So this is a real thing that's already being detected. So how to deal with that is going to be a challenge, a part of the adaptation mitigation challenge. But we also have to see how well the Earth system models can provide future information on those.